Hey there, fellow adventurers. I'm Ian.
And I'm Eric, and this is the Philomythia podcast, your one-stop shop for all things D&D. So, what are we talking about today?
Oh, today we are talking about horror and D&D, and we have a guest, my good friend Cody, who I've known since longer than you, Eric, since I've been like 2 or 3 years old. Cody, introduce yourself. What's up?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man.
My name's Cody Langille. Like Ian said, I've known Ian since, preschool?
Oh, yeah, like 2 or 3 years old, maybe 4.
Yeah. So, yeah, we've known each other long time.
Oh, yeah. And we met, like you said, a long time ago. Cody has gotten me into, like, pretty much all of this stuff that we've been talking about. He was the catalyst when we were younger to get me into Drizzed, or how I like to say it, Drizzit. All of that stuff. We used to play around a lot when we were kids. It was a good time.
Yeah, I have fond memories of us hanging out.
But now he writes books, and he's written. God, dude, how many books have you? How many books have you written now? Published.
Published. Let's see. So, 3, 4, like 5 or 6, I think. So.
Nice.
I'm pretty sure I have almost all of them. I might be missing one, but I don't think so. I think I have all of them so far.
Yeah.
All of them are in the horror genre?
Yeah, so like 3 of them are like horror that, I guess I'd call them dark urban fantasy with heavy horror elements. And then I have one that's like a middle grade horror for kids.
Oh, nice.
Kind of
Goosebumps, kind of?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. That one's about like a teddy bear that protects kids from nightmares and stuff.
Very cool. I like it.
And then I have 2 collections of short stories.
Okay.
Published.
Cool.
So.
And you have... sorry. What's up?
I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, you have something that's going on right now.
Right, yeah. So I also run a publishing company called Timber Ghost Press that publishes horror. And we have an anthology of cosmic horror stories like, Cthulhu.
Nice.
Lovecraftian type stuff. And we're doing a Kickstarter for it right now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We will link to that in the doobly-doo.
Yeah, for sure. Geez, I don't even know where to start. Eric.
I have questions.
I was going to say, I'm sure Eric has questions because I have knowledge of who you are already. So I'm like, I don't know what to ask.
Sure, yeah.
I want to start here because this is something I'm interested in. I've been doing some research. I know you have a publishing company now, but did you start with self-publishing? Is that kind of how you got into it, or what was your route into actually publishing your work?
So the route I took was I started writing short stories. And the first thing I ever got published was a short story in an anthology. If I remember correctly, it was Dark Moon Books Presents Ghosts, and I'd written a haunted hotel room short story.
Cool.
And they picked it up. So that was kind of my beginning, and for a while after that, it was just me publishing short stories, reaching out to different open calls or whatnot, submitting my work, and sometimes it get picked up, most of the time it get rejected. That's kind of how it goes. And then I started writing books, and my first book I published was traditionally published through a very small press. And then I have played with self-publishing a lot as well. They're both viable options these days. Right. So.
Yeah. It seems like, it's all a bunch of work, but every time I look at the self-publishing stuff, it just seems exhausting. It's like you're just doing everything, Yeah,
for sure. But the reason I went that route was I started to notice with some small publishers, they don't have a big budget for marketing. So I'd have to do a lot of my own marketing, but I wasn't getting the same return as if I had self-published because I'd still be doing the same amount of work, but then I'd get all the royalties. So
stops making sense.
Yeah. Whereas, like with the bigger publishing companies, they have a huge budget for that kind of thing.
Right.
I wouldn't have to do as much, but as we all know, it is very difficult to get in.
Right.
To those.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Much like music, same thing. Where if you're at the top, it's great, but for the rest of everybody, it's a lot of work.
Sure. Yeah.
So, Ian's talked about this a little bit, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your history with DMing and the kind of games you've run and what you like to run? And I know it's a lot of years. So
yeah, it's been. So I was doing the math the other day because I knew I was coming on here. It's been I think 30 years.
Wow.
Since I first started running games. Because it was back in 6th grade when I got interested in this stuff.
Right.
So like 92, 93, something like that. And it started because I picked up a book, The Crystal Shard by R.A. Salvatore.
It's classic.
Devoured that thing. And that was really what got me into reading and kind of what sparked my interest in writing, too.
Mm-hmm.
But in the back of those books, because they were Forgotten Realms books, were all these advertisements for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I started looking into that and something I wanted to do, so I picked up the rule books, and of course, no one around me played, so I had to be the DM, and that's just kind of stuck ever since. So.
Very nice. 30 years is a lot. That's a lot of experience.
Yeah.
If you have one that's explicit, what's your DMing philosophy? Is there a way that you approach, like, hey, I want to do this campaign, or at this point, is it you have so much experience that it's really each game is its own thing, or how do you approach that?
So for me, I prefer to run homebrew campaigns. I don't mind running like other campaigns like Curse of Strahd or something like that. In fact, I'm running one with Ian right now, Curse of Strahd.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the second time I've run through that 5th edition campaign.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the homebrew stuff because now I don't feel as restricted.
Right.
Whereas with those other campaigns, I kind of feel like I'm always looking something up. Like, oh, hold on. Yeah, let me see what they have to say about that. You know? And I feel a little more like my hands are tied, that I have to follow things. And of course, you know, you can play it how you want, right?
Sure.
And I do. And there's a lot of times I'll change things on the fly if it makes sense, or add or take away things.
Mm-hmm.
But I just feel like there is a lot more looking things up and reading through the source book at that point.
Definitely.
Whereas with homebrew, if I don't know, I can make it up right on the fly. It's not a big deal. There's no delay. So.
Yeah, one of our friends who DMs, we keep pushing him towards homebrew for that very reason. Like, hey, look, you're a great improviser. You don't have to look anything up. If you need information, you just pull it out of your brain, you know. So that's cool. I'm interested because you'll hear different things from, you know, some people run campaign that lasts for 5 years or whatever. So what's the longest campaign that you've run?
So I want to say maybe... Okay, well, the longest I've ever run was probably back in high school, because I had an ongoing campaign with my friends, and we would play probably 5 times a week after school and all throughout the weekend. And that campaign with those characters probably lasted 2 or 3 years. 5
days a week, 2 years.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Like, it went forever. And in fact, you know, that was like 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons rules, and we played so much that it finally got to the point where one of my players became like a god in the Forgotten Realms. So we, you know, retired that character.
Ascended.
Made him a deity. And in fact, after that campaign, some of the other characters made clerics following that deity.
Oh, so, really? That's cool.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Nice.
It was like a god of berserkers, and he was a minotaur and all sorts of stuff. It was pretty cool.
Nice. That's awesome. And then what kind of games do you enjoy running the most? It seems like horror is really kind of your wheelhouse, but is that true when you run like tabletop games as well?
Yes and no. So my favorite system to run is 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I love what they did with it. In my opinion, it's kind of the most... They take the best parts of all the other editions and kind of put them together. So I like running that the best. I'm the most familiar with it. But I'm always putting horror in my campaigns.
Right.
Something's happening, something weird.
Something bad, dark. Yeah.
And another thing I like to do is I always like to try and corrupt my players. And you have to be a little bit careful with it, and you got to know your table, because it can ruin a party pretty quick if they're not the right setup. But I'm always like dropping like cursed items in there. Like,
intelligent weapons.
Spirits, like speaking to the players and offering them like, you know, powers. And whatnot. And the best is when you can get them into a situation where, you know, half the party's dropped unconscious, and they're like, oh, I can give you the power to bring them back. You just have to do this, you know. And it's hard for them to say no, because they don't want to see their buddies die.
Right. But do a little evil to do a lot of good. Come on. What are you waiting
for? Yeah, I ran a campaign a couple years ago where that exact thing happened, where there was a lich that was trying to get its phylactery put back together. And come back to life, and it was corrupting this gnome cleric, and eventually the gnome like succumbed to it and just kind of embraced it, and she got super powerful, and a couple other party members kind of jumped on her side, but the party kind of ended up fighting each other in the climax and losing against the lich, of course, you know. But in the next campaign session, I like put it in the same world and fast forwarded to like 50 years, where now that lich has this huge undead army that's sweeping through the land, and this party's trying to stop it. Mm-hmm. And one of the NPC like mini bosses was that gnome cleric.
Oh, sick!
Nice. That's cool. Yeah. Obviously, you DM a lot, but do you play very much these days, or has it always mainly been DMing?
Mainly DMing. I do get to play from time to time if someone wants to pick up and DM for a bit.
Right.
But I'd say 90% of the time I'm running the game.
But do you prefer running it too?
I like doing both. Playing's fine because I can kind of just relax and play my character and not have to worry about everything else. Right. But I really don't mind DMing. It's fun for me. I like creating the stories for people.
Sure.
And especially when they're having a good time. So.
Oh, I gotta interject then for a moment, because like we've said, me and Cody have been friends for so long. He got me into this, and when we were younger, there was just the two of us when we'd hang out, so we didn't really ever play like Dungeons and Dragons in the standard sense. It was, we would do like battles, or we would just like talk about it a lot, or we would act it out as us, the people, and like we'd have swords and we'd do battle in our imaginations, and we did a lot of that growing up.
Yeah.
But so over the last, I don't know, it's almost been a year, right?
Yeah.
That I joined has been the first time I've got to be a player in a Cody like campaign, and it has been an absolute joy. It is so fun. I've told all of my friends, I'm like, he's a great DM, man. It's so much fun. Like it's so relaxed and so. Oh, I just loved it. I've loved it. I've loved being in that group. The players are all great. They're so much fun to play with. It's just fun, man. It's just a lot of fun.
I'm glad you're enjoying it, man. And I can't wait until we get through Curse of Strahd so I can run a home game for you,
I'm stoked too. That's super cool. And I'm super bummed I missed the last session of Strahd, because I know something happened. I know that something...
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah, we left off with Strahd basically showing up. You're going to come back into a world of hurt, man.
Yeah, that's going to be a bad situation. But Cody definitely has like just like the difference between like me GMing or John or Eric or Cody. Like Cody has his own flavor of GMing, and we'll get a taste of it in a different game type later. We're going to play some Cthulhu with him.
Oh, yeah.
And call it Cthulhu, man. It's a great system.
It's a brutal system.
It is brutal.
Speaking of Cthulhu, what do you love about the horror genre? And we can even talk about like the Call of Cthulhu system too, specifically if you want.
Yeah, so I kind of grew up with horror. When I was really young, maybe even too young, I don't know. But my mom and I used to watch horror movies. So I kind of grew up watching things, like Alien, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, stuff like that. So I really fell in love with the genre. And then when I got into reading, at first I kind of devoured all the fantasy books I could get my hands on. And then it started to shift. I started reading Stephen King and Dean Koontz, Bentley Little, things like that. And I eventually got my hands on some Lovecraft and really kind of enjoyed what he did with they call it the Cthulhu mythos, right? Like the overarching like background of it all. Because Lovecraft stories, if you've read, I don't know if you've read any or not, but some of them are cool and some of them are just crap, straight up crap. And Lovecraft himself was pretty racist, and that shows through in a lot of his writing. But you look at cosmic horror today, and there's a lot of awesome authors out there that are kind of taking it back and like getting rid of that racism that was kind of so steeped in there. There's a lot of awesome cosmic horror out there. So it was kind of natural, I think, for me to take that love of that genre and kind of just bring it into role-playing too. Because I feel like, I understand a little bit on what can be considered scary or creepy. What's tense, what makes people nervous, or all that kind of stuff. And it's different trying to portray that in a tabletop role-playing setting, because you have to kind of get everybody's buy-off. Everyone has to kind of be focused on what we're doing. We can't be having side conversations, looking on their phone, things like that. So that's something, you kind of have to agree upon as a group. Like, hey, we're going to play this role-playing game. It's going to be horror, and I'm going to need your full attention when we're playing, but I can guarantee you that if you give me that, you're going to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have a good time.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's interesting that horror kind of takes a slightly different mentality from the players for it to work, right?
Yeah, it really does. And I'm sure you've experienced this at some point in your life, freaking yourself out,
mm-hmm.
Whether you're watching something scary or reading something scary or you're a place that makes you nervous, your mind starts going and you can easily start to freak yourself out and get scared.
Yeah.
So when we're in a role-playing situation, as long as you're focused and in the moment and you're in that kind of mindset, it can work and it can be wonderful when it happens too. So,
well, I definitely am going to add something right here because he's delving into it, and he mentioned Cody watched horror movies when he was young, very young, maybe too young, he says. Well, Cody was the first person to show me a scary movie when we were young, and it fucked me up. Like, I was so scared, I was in tears, crying.
Is that why you're the way you are now?
Maybe.
Is that what happened?
I
traumatized. He traumatized people. That's what's crazy is it was Friday the 13th is what we were watching, and Cody was just down.
Was it the original?
Like all of them. Cody was having a marathon.
Oh, okay.
And
because I think it was actually Friday the 13th at the time too. So it was like, hey, let's watch all these shows.
And I was like, we watched like a few of them at first, and I lost my shit. Like, I was scared. And, that evolved eventually into me loving horror. And then I was, again, Cody had published a book, and so I bought it, and I was reading it. I was just chilling. And again, now that I'm in my fucking 30s, and I love horror, and I love scary shit. I'm reading this book, and a certain thing happens in the book, and I had to put it down. I had to go, oh, fuck. Fuck. That was fucking scary. I don't even know what the fuck. And I had to text Cody to be like, you did it again. I'm fucking
son of a
35 years old, and you scared me to death. Like, I'm fucking terrified right now. So
I think I remember. I think you were reading the sewing room.
That is 100% the sewing room scene, and it was terrifying to me. It fucked my brain up. The light, like just the visual of that light being on. I was like, no.
Don't open the door.
Don't open the door. Oh, they're opening the door. What?
You know they are.
Oh yeah. So yeah, it's just history. That again, a lot of the weird things that I've come to embrace as my personality almost came from being influenced by Cody. Long hair, Metallica, music, those seeds were planted hanging out with Cody one year, and he was like, yeah, I've been listening to this Metallica, and I was like, oh, that's supposed to be like bad music.
It's the devil.
Yeah, and then he played me, funny enough, it was Load, because that was the new album that had come out, and I'd never heard Metallica.
It's a new hotness.
And I loved it. Like, there was this song, The House That Jack Built.
Yeah.
And dude, when that song came on, it transfixed me. I'd never heard anything like that in my life, and I was like, I wanted to be able to do that. Like, I didn't know that I wanted to play guitar. I was like, that sounds so fucking awesome. But
and then you did.
Yeah, then I learned all that stuff eventually.
Yeah, man.
Then you dove into the Squeedles.
Yeah, way deep into the Squeedles. So yeah, it was just the horror thing. So bringing it back to horror, I definitely your books scare me, man.
Well, good. That means they're doing the job, right?
They're fucking scary.
That's right. So speaking of your books, why don't you tell us a little more about your publishing company?
Yeah. So it was last January. I decided to make a company, call it Timber Ghost Press.
Mm-hmm.
And my reasons for building that company were a couple different reasons. One is I lead the Utah chapter of the Horror Writers Association.
Okay.
I started that chapter back in 2012 when I joined the HWA. because there wasn't a local chapter at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we wanted to kind of do was, spread horror to the masses. So we decided, hey, each year let's kind of put together an anthology of horror. We'll pick a different theme each time. We'll have someone publish it. We'll reach out to publishers or whatnot. And we did. Our first one was called Old Scratch and Owl Hoots, and it was like an anthology of like Old Western horror put together.
Oh, okay.
Like poetry and flash fiction and short fiction. And we had someone in the group that was a small press publisher, so they took on the first one. And actually, they took on the first three. And then after that, we switched publishers to another person. And then after that, we switched the next 2 books to a different publisher. Mm-hmm. And then as the chapter head, I started noticing trying to manage inventory for all of that was kind of a pain in the butt. Because I'm reaching out to like 3 different publishers, trying to get the inventory in. Mm-hmm. They all had different kinds of contracts going on, different stuff. So I thought, well, if I build my own publishing company and I publish all of our anthologies moving forward, it'd be much easier at that point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that was kind of one of the reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Another reason I had is I've worked with some small press publishers out there. And I've worked with some great ones, and I've worked with some not so great ones. And I kind of started to see like, oh man, there's this disparity between small press publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to create a space for authors where, when they think of Timber Ghost, they think, oh yeah, they put out quality, great stuff, and they take care of their authors,
mm-hmm.
and do all the things that I wished a small press publisher would do.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to build that company, is kind of be that example of greatness.
Right.
So I have no idea if I am being that or not. I'm just trying to treat my authors right and do good by them and put out good stuff. So we'll see.
That's cool. So how do you feel? Do you feel like, because you said like Crystal Shard kind of sparked your interest in a lot of this, like kind of the core, which is interesting because for me it was Dragonlance Chronicles. That was really what fueled my love,
Those are great books too, yeah.
But do you feel like role-playing games and writing have some kind of influence on each other for you? Or
for sure, because you're creating a story, right? And if you want to create a good story, it's going to follow like some building blocks, and that it's pretty similar
mm-hmm.
whether you're doing a role-playing story or whether you're writing a story.
Right.
And I feel the difference is when I'm writing one, I have full control of everything,
mm-hmm.
whereas when I'm running one, I kind of set the foundation, and then this bundle of chaos called the players pops in and just messes it all up. And now it's my job to make sure it stays on track on how I want it to go, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the key, I think, is to do that in such a way where the players still feel like they have control of what's going on,
mm-hmm.
and they're doing what they want to do, when in reality, I'm still pushing you towards my end goals.
Right. They don't see the hand behind the screen.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Because like when I create a campaign or a session, I'll have I call them beats, right? I have certain beats I want to hit or scenes I want to hit,
mm-hmm.
and I know where I want to go. So even if the players like don't go down that path, I can easily just maneuver them right back there, and they'll never know.
Right.
And I'm sure there's a lot of players going, "What the hell? No,
mm-hmm.
You're railroading us." But if you do it right, it doesn't feel like railroading at all, because I've definitely done it wrong in the past where it is railroading and
mm-hmm.
everyone can tell, and nobody's having fun at that point.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's an interesting dance where if you have if it's not like West Marsh's kind of D&D style where the players are just completely in control. If you have more of a story to tell, how delicate the dance is, where it's like you're trying to get the players to certain things, but you don't want them to feel completely manipulated, quote unquote. Right.
Yeah.
And you'll know if you're doing it bad, your players are going to let you know real quick, hey,
mm-hmm.
what the hell's happening right now?
You could just see it in the way that they participate too.
Mm-hmm.
If
mm-hmm.
they're distracted and not paying attention,
mm-hmm.
or it doesn't look like they're having fun, then you got to take a look at yourself as the dungeon master and be like, okay, what's going on my end? Is it something that I'm doing?
Right.
Can I change something up? Do we need to shift gears a little bit?
Yeah,
but,
for sure. So one thing you said, which is interesting because I haven't heard this a lot, is that you actually like 5th edition better than 2nd edition. And you kind of hear this, 2nd edition is kind of lauded these days, and you have the OSR and, all this old school stuff. But I remember 2nd edition being opaque trying to learn it. Like, you open the books and you're just like, what is happening right now? So, first, do you feel like it took a long time to learn AD&D? Was there a big learning curve for you?
Yeah, especially if you've never done anything like that before. In that rule book, you open it up, and like you said, it's just like, a bunch of numbers and stats.
Right,
and
right.
They do their best to try and like tell you what it all means, but it's pretty dry, that 2nd edition stuff. And don't get me wrong, I love 2nd edition. I played so much 2nd edition and had so many of the rule books and like source materials and like players' handbooks and whatever.
Right.
It was ridiculous. In fact, I could probably run 2nd edition right now without any of that and just by memory.
Right.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
But yeah, when it comes down to like what's the best system in my mind as far as Dungeons and Dragons is concerned, 5th edition hands down. I really feel like they took a lot of the crunchiness, from 2nd edition and 3rd 3.5. And I never played 4th, so I can't compare it to anything. I just never got into 4th.
Right.
And they kind of like dumbed it down to the point where players can jump in pretty easily. It doesn't take a lot of explaining like how to play.
Right.
There's still enough choice in there that you feel like you're creating characters that aren't just copies of the other characters with different names on them,
Right.
Like if you play a fighter, it plays different than a cleric or a paladin.
Sure.
So yeah, because I played a lot of 3rd edition and 3.5, and I played a ton of Pathfinder, like 1st edition Pathfinder. I ran a campaign that was almost 2 years long in Pathfinder, to the point where I burned out completely on it, and I never really want to play again. But it got to the point in there where, the characters got so high level and had so many things they could do that combat was just taking forever. I had to start making my campaigns or sessions like, okay, in this session, I'm going to plan for 1 minor combat and 1 bigger combat, because otherwise we're just not going to get through it. And even then, like the bigger ones going like an hour and a half, 2 hours long, because everyone's like, oh, what should I do? Well, I've got, 12 dozen things to choose from, and I can do 15 actions, and
I'm going to do all of them. I'm going to take
and
all
here's
my
my
actions.
handful of dice I'm going to roll across the table. And I mean, it's cool and epic, but it just slows everything down. And I feel like 5th edition kind of smoothed that out a little bit.
I found it to be really flexible, where if you know 5th, you could really reskin it sci-fi or horror, whatever you want it, and it works fairly well.
Yeah, for sure.
Surprisingly so. So I personally like it. Obviously, we play it all the time, but it's interesting to see that it might just be rhetoric too, but online people really kind of poo-poo it. Not as much as 4th edition. I think 4th edition is probably the most infamous at this point. But
well, I think what's happening too is people learn their first system, and that's the system they kind of fall in love with. And so it's just like when you have a remake of a movie come out, right?
Sure.
All the original fans are like, oh, this is crap, blah, 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 blah. But you got to realize that remake isn't for you, right? It's for new fans. It's for people to get them hooked onto that series or genre or whatever franchise. And it's not really meant for the old school fans.
Right.
And I kind of feel like D&D is the same way. Like all the people who learn 2nd edition AD&D are like, oh, that's the best system ever, blah, blah, blah. I love doing math like THACO and stuff like that.
THACO. Beautiful THACO. It's the crazy thing is you can still play 2nd edition. Like you can buy all the books on DM's Guild. Like it's not like 2nd edition suddenly is illegal or anything, which is that's the weird part. People are disgruntled because people are enjoying something that they don't.
Yeah, no. Play what you want to play, you know?
Yeah.
Don't poo-poo others for what they like.
Right.
Yeah. Don't poo-poo others.
Don't poo-poo others.
Don't poo-poo others.
Make that a t-shirt or a sticker, I don't know. Don't poo-poo others.
Don't poo-poo others.
Stay sweaty, don't poo-poo others.
Let people enjoy what they enjoy.
I'll interject a few random things. Last night was the final session of my homebrew campaign.
Oh, how'd it go, man?
It went okay. Technically the real final session, this was like the story wrap up. The real last week was when they like defeated the boss, like the big bad guy, and but it was done like they defeated him pretty late in the session, so I didn't feel like we had time to let everyone give us their ending. So we pushed the ending to yesterday, and I did like a really high vantage point recap of all the story and how that got them to where they were, and then let each person kind of narrate their ending. It was cool. It was fun.
What's next?
The next thing is, well, I mean, for me, I'm running that Blades game on Sundays as kind of like my full GM at the moment, because Eric is going to be the GM for Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is the possibility of kind of like what you do. I'm getting a tiny group together because I don't want to GM 7 or 8 people again. That's just too much.
Yeah.
It's so hard. I would do it again, but not GM the same way. I would create a campaign that was much more minor narrative and more driven by the players, so I'm not having to create this thing that doesn't seem to be engaged with. But I'm doing a salt marsh type thing.
Okay.
Where but it's only once a month, kind of like how we do it, where it's just on a Saturday where we schedule it just when everyone can make it. It's like, hey, can you make this day? And the group's like, oh yeah, I got this on that. I'm like, oh cool, we'll do it on a different day. And so scheduling it and doing one kind of, fun, focused type of game where the party is smaller and it's a pre-gen, because I've never run like a pre-gen thing before. So I'm taking the pre-gen and kind of, twisting it up a little bit, giving it a little different flavor, maybe a little more story here and there, and kind of connecting the adventures of Salt Marsh, and then maybe, depending on the crew, like the group, if they're enjoying it, it could branch off into who knows what. But that's the ideal thing right now. But Blades on Sunday is my main GM thing right now.
Cool, man.
Yeah, it's fun.
I'd be interested to see how your pre-generated one goes and your thoughts on those.
Sure, for sure.
It's a love-hate for me. Like, for one, I like them because I don't have to prep as much, but like I said, I feel a little restricted.
Right.
Running those. But.
Yeah.
Do you find you do any retooling? Like, do you read through and make changes, or do you try to stick to what's there?
I will definitely make changes as I see fit, and especially like on the fly too, if I need to. Like if we get to a certain point and it's either too difficult or too easy, I'll adjust as necessary there.
Right.
Specifically with Curse of Strahd, as the character's level, I make Strahd stronger too. Because right now, I'll be honest, like the level that the group is, you guys are, if you were to fight Strahd one-on-one, you're going to whoop his butt. Like, it'll be too easy. It won't be climactic at all.
Right.
It won't feel like you earned it,
Yeah.
Right.
So I kind of put Strahd on like a slider almost, as they get stronger, so does Strahd, so that when it comes to that final battle, it does feel tough.
Nice.
Sure.
And it feels worthwhile, and you feel like you earned that victory, or you feel like you got beat by a worthy opponent.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Speaking of that is something that kind of was a problem for me doing the homebrew. And in the end, during the final battle, I'd found a way to make the players feel a little bit better about it. And they all made comments about it. Is I just created these 2 enemies that they didn't have really anything, but they had a list of, I just call them abilities. And each one of the abilities, like, did something pretty crazy just on a save. Like, the one that the players hated was an intelligence save, and it would, if you failed it on your next turn, you have to go and attack your nearest ally, like full on attack them with like whatever you would normally attack with. You have to do that to your ally. And one player almost killed one of our other players because he was a gunslinger and he had this crazy gun with sharpshooter on it, and he blasted our little bard, like so bad. It was brutal. It almost killed him. Eric's character got hit by our barbarian, and I don't know if it almost killed you, but it definitely you took a hit. I remember that.
I was pretty tough at that point, but it definitely took me down below 100 HP for sure.
Yeah. Cody has told me about one of his campaigns. I think it was your Pathfinder one where you had created just too much and they were too strong, and you were like, every fucking thing I have to do, it's just so hard to challenge them.
Yeah, and I made the mistake early on because it was a homebrew campaign where I was giving the players extra abilities, like empowers, as they leveled too.
That's what Ian did.
Yep.
Same thing.
And it got out of hand pretty quick. And yeah, like, okay, here's the next battle. There's like 3 Baylors and all these things and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And they just cut through it and you're like, fuck.
Yeah, I remember one time, like, they fought this, like, big-ass red dragon, and they killed it so quick. I was just like, what the hell, guys? What am I even doing here?
Right? We had a...
Am I a joke to you?
Right?
Am I a joke?
The answer is yes. The DM's always a joke to the player.
So then I had to, like, start, like, making scenarios where I'm, like, forcing the party to split. Just to make it more, like, hard for them to do, harder for them to defeat creatures.
Nice. That would do it, too, like, separating them. Oh, and those beings were singing, and their song would get inside, like the song would change, and that would be the save. So I had a save for every attribute. It was a strength, charisma, dexterity. I had one for everything, which I was like, that's funny that you don't see a lot of like these saves in D&D very much, like at least not in the games I've been in.
I was going to say, you don't see intelligence saves very often,
right?
And there's not a lot of characters that have like really good intelligence saves.
Right. Mm-hmm. When I first created this, like the abilities, I was like, let's make the DC like 23. Ooh. And then I thought about that. I was like, that's a super high one. And my characters are powerful and have the ability to give themselves advantage a lot. But I was like, 23 seems too high. So I dropped a few of them like into like 19. Some of them were 20. Some of them are 18. And you guys still failed some of them, even with your superpowers. So I was like, okay, cool.
I would say, too, that part of the interesting thing with those two creatures is that we had to learn. There was a learning curve to find out, like, we can't actually attack them.
Oh, right.
They can't actually be hurt. They're not corporeal. And there's another mechanic going on. And so it took like 2.5 rounds to be like, yeah, we're not. Okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be done about those creatures. Just focus on the big bad.
Yep. That because they were part of him and they had no AC, but their hit points were fueled by his, so the characters could throw shit at those two witches, and it would appear like they were doing nothing because they would still be there. And who the hit points are actually draining from is the boss. And they just don't know that.
Oh, okay.
So they keep hitting this thing and they're like, it's doing nothing. Abandon it.
That's a cool idea. I like that.
So had to solve the mystery.
Yeah, and I jacked that actually from Destiny. On one of the raids in Destiny 1, it's not what happens in Destiny, but it was the inspiration. When you do this boss battle, as soon as you kind of knock this certain part down, these two witches appear and they're doing the Song of Death, and you have to go kill both of them before they complete the Song of Death or everyone dies. And it's really fucking hard. And I was like, having two witches, and so I like just started evolving that from there. But it was just an interesting way to combat powerful characters. And I also did that thing me and Eric had talked about where I attacked their character sheet, where I would like drain stuff off of them. Yeah. Like, you got hit with this, -2 to your strength score. And they were like, what?
That hits characters hard too, because they're never expecting it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's why I love one of my last encounters in my Monday campaign. I have just come to love the shadow creature because they're like CR super low. And they don't really attack that well. I think they have a +5, so they're not, not a pushover. And they've got like 7 hit points or something. But if they hit you, you lose like 1d4, I think, strength or constitution. And so you get hit with a few of those, and it's bad. It's a bad time. And I mobbed my players. There was like 20 shadows on the team.
Yeah. It starts to stack up. I like creatures like that. I like creatures that throw the weird saves out there. Because players just don't expect it. I ran a campaign a while back where the party was attacking this creature in a mine, right? And it was controlling like the town. And they went through, and I had them all make this save. I forget what it was. I think it was Wisdom. And they all failed it. And I didn't tell them what happened. I was just like, cool, let's keep going. Don't worry about it. They didn't even know if they failed. I was just like, hey, give me Wisdom save. Let me know what you got. Cool. Here we go. And so they fight this creature. They defeat it, or they think they defeat it, and they leave. But then as they're adventuring after that, they start to notice that everything's kind of perfect, like too perfect, like everything's working out just how it should, and like nothing's going wrong. They all start getting doubts. So I'm like, okay, cool, give me another Wisdom save. And they make this one, and they wake up, and they're back in the mines fighting that creature. And they'd been under like, mind control, thinking that they were just doing whatever. And like the whole session almost.
Oh, man.
We circled back around and like, nope, you're still fighting this thing, man.
That is brutal.
We won. No, we didn't. Shit.
I would be like, fuck.
But it was just so cool watching the realization hit them like, wait a minute. This isn't cool. Something's wrong.
There's nothing like having those D&D moments in a campaign that just are so iconic for that group, and you have to like really be there like to get that piece of that. It's so cool. It's one of the fun things I love about doing these.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. All right, well, we're getting about to the mark, so Cody, do you want to give us some parting thoughts?
Cool, yeah. So here's a little bit of advice for the new DMs and GMs out there.
Yeah.
Don't overplan a session. I learned this early on. If you start over planning and you've got everything going on exactly how you want it, the players are going to mess it up like within the first 15 minutes. Then you're going to get frustrated trying to like lead them back in there. What I usually do is, I mentioned this earlier, is I'll come up with like beats or scenes that I want to hit, and then the space in between there's blank, and however we get to those beats and scenes is up to the players, and then it's my job to get us to those. In such a way that it feels fun. So yeah, don't overplan things. Just put bare bones when it comes to planning.
Right.
So
I think that's good advice.
I think so
too. I feel
too.
like you usually use about 10% of whatever you plan.
I just remember early on like planning these huge sessions, and I have like pages and pages and pages of notes and maps and all this stuff, and it just goes out the window.
Yep.
So, yeah, for sure.
And all that time was wasted.
Yeah, well, I feel like there's going to that. There's definitely a rite of passage though for your first things you start planning that you almost do, like even when you're trying not to overplan, you do.
Yeah.
Because you're just so excited and you have so many things, so you throw them all out there. And it's hard not to do that,
Oh, for sure. And you'll find what works best for you.
Yeah.
Like what level of planning is your perfect level.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But I agree with you. More of a bare bones approach seems to elicit more fun from players.
For sure.
At least from my experience so far.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have one campaign down now. I'm official. I got my
one in the belt.
Got one down.
He's got the merit badge.
Got one badge here.
You gotta notch your pistol now.
Yeah, baby. Yep. All right. Well, should we have Cody say the line?
Absolutely. The guest, I think, should always sign us off.
Sign us off.
Sign us off.
What do I say? Stay sweaty?
Oh, yeah. You know it.
Got it.
All right.
Staying sweaty.
Stay sweaty.
Force damage. Force damage. Pew, pew, I poo poo, and here comes the
like, share, subscribe.